Hi everybody, thank you for joining me a little bit later this afternoon. It's currently 3:30 in the afternoon here, pretty miserable here in the UK. And so here we are with our question and answer session. We're going to try and do this for about another hour. And if you want to pop along to that side, or is it that side? Which side is it, Louise? Is it that side, the chat? Yeah, you're over there, but is the chat to my left or to my right?
It's to your right,
sorry. It's this way. So if you want to pop along to the chat, if you're on YouTube, pop along here, pop some questions. Oh my God, it's a good afternoon already. So yeah, pop some questions in the box. Just let me know what you want me to answer. Obviously everything jewelry related, please. And I'll do my very, very best over the next hour. I think we have a first question, Louise.
Yes, author is asking, why change rose gold into yellow gold after soldering? What did I do wrong? Can I undo it? It looks like when sanding, the rose gold comes slightly back. Is red gold better to work with?
Okay, so what has happened, because rose gold is an alloy, there is more copper in that alloy that gives it the red color. So then what happens then is when you heat the piece and then put the piece in the acid depletes the copper. It takes the copper out of the surface, which then obviously then will leave you with perhaps a little bit more of a higher carat gold, but it's the yellow gold that is coming through. So all you've done, you've just simply taken a very, very fine layer of copper out of the surface, and that's why it's gone yellow. All you need to do is to polish the piece, or just get your buff stick or a bit of sandpaper, a bit of emery paper, just take that very fine layer off, give it a polish, and you should be back to rose gold again. Obviously, the more times then you keep putting it back and forth in the acid, the more times you've got to sort of keep doing that particular procedure and polishing. So I wouldn't do it straight away. I'd wait until the piece is pretty much all finished, no more soldering jobs to do. Then you can go and buff, then you can go and polish and get that lovely rose gold color back on the piece. Hope that helps you. Yes, sorry, we don't have a microphone on Louise, unfortunately, today. So you have to...
I'll shout.
She'll just shout, yeah. Okay, yes, Louise, next question.
This is from Len. Do you ever use solder wire by placing it to the preheated metal and letting it flow into the joint rather than using bits of solder placed on the joint before heating?
Okay, so that's a sort of technique that's called stick feeding or stick soldering. I do use that particular technique. My only problem with that technique is that because you've got your solder, and yes, it is as a stick, it's very hard to regulate how much solder goes onto the piece. If you cut little pallions, little snippets off the end, you can regulate and you can sort of work out how much solder is going upon to that piece. But if you have got the joint and it's nice and hot and you put the solder onto the joint, it's very hard to limit the amount of solder that actually goes onto that piece. I would do it if I was doing a bezel and perhaps put the stick feed from the inside of the bezel. I would never use it upon really a seam, because you're going to get far too much solder. And then obviously the more solder that goes onto the piece, the more you've got to take off the piece. And then you've wasted an awful lot of money then by putting the solder on. You can just touch the solder where you need it. Sorry, that's my phone going off. Someone's zwifting. Let me turn that down. You can just touch the stick up onto the solder joint very quickly, but I still wouldn't do it. I don't like to do it. It's sort of a technique that they use in like brazing and welding, that sort of thing, where they don't mind how much of the solder or brazing rod goes on the piece. So me personally, I cut little pallions, but if you get a better job with your stick soldering, yes, you can do it, and there's nothing wrong with that at all. But I like to limit the amount of solder that goes on my piece. Hope that helps you. Yes, Louise, next question.
This is from Maureen. A question on piercing out a design on a backplate. Should this be done before or after bezel is soldered down?
Personally, I think I would want to solder the bezel onto the backplate first, especially if you've got quite a symmetrical cut out on that back plate, because you may put the bezel on the plate when it's been pierced and it may be slightly out. It may move back and forth, not quite be central or symmetrical. So I think I would rather solder the bezel on, then mark out the design, and you can get it all nice and even. And if you have it so the back plate is on the peg and the bezel is on the top, you can look down and you can make sure then you don't mark the bezel at all, and you can get a much better, clearer cutout just by doing that. And that would be the best bet, I think, especially if you've got something that's nice and symmetrical. You don't want to have it slightly off or anything like that, because when you look on the back, you'll see it. Yeah. Okay, thank you, Maureen. Good question. Good question. Yes, Louise. Next question.
This one's from Logan. Do you have certain pliers that you use only for stone setting?
Yes, I have a pair of sniper nose pliers. Like these here. These are a pair that I've had for quite a long time now. Let's see if we can get a bit more of a closer up on this for you to see. The camera will go a bit closer. There we go. Cool. Okay, so these are a pair of sniper nose pliers. Quite fine pointed, as you can see. And on the inside of one of the jaws, I think it's these jaws here, you should be able to just about see, I've put a little bit of a groove down the center of that jaw, right on the inside. Now, what we can do with that is use that to pull down the claws. The pliers aren't going to slip off the claw, because the claw or the prong is going to locate in that groove. So say we've got our claw setting by here, and the stone goes into place, and I want to pull these claws over. I can put one of the plain jaws on one side of the setting, and then put the jaws that has the line, the groove down it, over the claw I want to pull in. And as I pull that claw over, it won't slip, and that will be the best job for keeping that claw nice and central. Then you then go to the opposite side, turn the ring around, put the claw you've just eased over slightly against the plain part of the jaws, and then the grooved part will go on the other claw, and you can just ease them down slowly, and that ensures then that the jaws won't slip. And apart from that, that's the only real pair of pliers that I've sort of slightly adapted to enable you to do that. I don't have any other pliers really. I may use some top cutters if I need to lift a claw slightly, and the same sort of thing. You get the one face on the outside edge of the claw and get the cutting edge just under the tip, and you can just lever back that claw or that prong slightly. But yes, but you can make them just get a slight file or a diamond wheel to put a groove just onto the inside of that claw. I shall show you again. There we go. So there's the pliers there, and just on the inside, just up, I think you can just about see it. Yeah, there's a little line on the inside of that jaw there, and that's where the claw goes. There we go. Thank you so much. Thank you, Logan. Next question.
Is it possible to set a stone with a gypsy setting in 14 to 18 karat white gold with a hand burnisher, or is the metal so hard that you would have to use a hammer handpiece?
Okay, so I find that 18 karat white gold as well. Is it 18 karat white?
14, 18.
14, 18. So if it was white gold, 18 karat really tends to be quite hard. If you're using 18 karat yellow, nice, lovely, soft metal, and a hand burnisher should be sufficient. Some people perhaps are afraid of slipping and scratching the stone, or the tip of the burnisher may come over and damage the stone. So a little hammer action handpiece could be a bit more precise, and you can really hold it perhaps in your GRS Benchmate, and you can get the hammer handpiece exactly where you want it, just to ease over the metal. Yeah, either way, if you're good with a burnisher and you've got the accuracy and dexterity and you can really accurately do it, use the burnisher. And if you've got a hammer action handpiece, use that. It gets a lot easier, lot easier. How are we doing? Okay.
Yes. Mike is asking, have you ever made, forgive me if I'm pronouncing this incorrectly, shibuchi mokume?
Mokume.
Have you ever made, yeah. Have you ever made shibuchi?
Shibuchi.
What special tools would I need?
Oh my gosh, I can't. Is that using lead in with the metal?
Japanese copper alloy.
Right, okay. Off the top of your head, just having to know these things. No, I've never used it. I know a friend of mine in university tried to do something very similar to that using some Japanese alloys, getting like a black finish on a black alloy, but I don't know. I've never tried it, to be honest. I've heard about it, but I'm afraid I don't know. Perhaps we can make a note of that one and we can sort of do a bit more research and let you know on that. But if it is using a copper alloy, I would always try and keep separate tools for that. If you've got to melt it down in a crucible, which I'm sure you do have to, I'll always make sure that crucible is only used for that particular alloy. I wouldn't use that crucible again with silver or with gold or anything like that. Keep it all separate. Likewise, if you use a stirring rod, keep that separate for that particular alloy as well, just in case you get any cross-contamination when you're working them with your silver and gold. But from what I know, that would be the best way of doing it. Special tools, I don't know, I'm afraid. I'm awfully sorry about that, but we will find out. What a nasty question, wasn't that? Next question.
Nina is asking, what is the best thickness for sterling silver plate when piercing delicate details?
Okay, depends on, I suppose, what you are wanting that piece of metal for. If you've got a back plate, as we just mentioned a moment ago, it's like 0.5 millimeter would be fine. If you go anything thinner than 0.5 millimeter, you're going to have to get a really, really fine saw blade, perhaps a 6-stroke, 4-stroke, something like that, because the metal is very, very thin. You need more teeth involved touching the surface. But depends on what you want. We cut out some name initials, name plates, that sort of thing, and that's about 1.2 millimeter thick, which is a good, nice thickness, but you don't want to do anything thinner than 0.5 millimeter, really, because it's going to be chattering, and you've got to make sure it's nicely pushed down upon your bench peg. So what's the best metal? Yeah, say 0.75 millimeter, 2 millimeter is a nice sort of size. Even if you're sort of practicing, that's an ideal thickness in silver, or if you're practicing copper, that would be ideal as well. Yes, Louise, next question.
Sandy is asking, do you use a hammer tool with your flex shaft to set stones in bezels or to texture metal? If so, do you have any tips?
I do, and I'm going to do my running now. I'll go and get one downstairs. Well, we had 20 seconds last week, didn't we? We should have we should play something on the screen actually while I disappear. Countdown. Right, I'm going to get my hammer action handpiece and a couple of tips. Bear with me. 20 seconds. Here we go. Go.
I see.
I can't find it. Found it. I haven't done it if I haven't done it. Didn't do it, did I? No idea. Okay, hammer action handpiece. You can get the slip joint or the Euro joint. Now, the tips here, you can buy what they're called anvils. And what you can do, I'll just use my pliers to take these off. You can, there we go. Okay, so these unscrew, and you can buy little packs of these. And what you can do is, alter the tips here into different shapes. I've got a bit of a chamfered point on here, but with a very narrow tip that would get into nice little nooks and crannies and get something quite fine, or you can simply file across the front of the tips as well if you want a nice broad surface to get into, and they just simply screw into place just like that, and then you've got a good system then for hammering over your bezels. Now, don't forget that you can also buy these anvils with a little upturned diamond on them, in them as well, and that's brilliant for putting like together like a frosting finish upon a piece as well. We got one of them downstairs as well. I didn't have time to go looking for that one, but these little anvils, yeah, buy them, shape them. You can shape them with a file, but don't forget, don't polish them completely, because you don't want an absolute finished high finish on here, because it's likely to slip off the metal. So buy them, shape them into whatever shape you want. You can shape them into narrow points, wide, you know, get the general gist, the idea. Just get a few and they'll be ideal then for hammering your bezels over. As I said, don't make them polished because they're likely to slip off the bezel, but just leave a slight bit of a rough texture, perhaps from your buff stick, and then it's not going to slip too much. It's not gin and tonic this week, it's just simple water. Okay. Louise, any questions?
Yes. Where was I? This one's from Michael. I have been using a Dremel for years and I am purchasing a flex shaft, but I don't know what size chuck to get, 4mm or 6mm.
I would always go for something that has a removable handpiece. So this is a Fordham SR flex shaft. Let me just see if we can just quickly zoom out on here and I will show you. So we've got, will it come off? I don't think it'll actually come off, will it? No, it won't come off. Okay, it's not coming off. Anyway, it's a Fordham SR pendant motor flex shaft, and we've got an interchangeable end to it. There's different types. There's called a Euro or a slip joint. I would always get one of these because then it enables you then to have different hand pieces. This, let me just spin this round. So this is a quick release. So you simply flick the lever, the burr comes out. Okay, doke. So that's nice and easy, especially if you've got 2.35mm shafts upon that. You can pull that off and then you can get different chucks. So this now is what is called a Jacob's chuck. Let me get my, excuse me a second. There we go. All right then, so that then has a key and that we can open up the jaws on this end to whatever size you want. And this is ideal if you've got something like a 3mm burr, 3mm mandrels, that sort of thing, or you're using large drills, because you can open this up to, I think that's roughly around about 4mm in size, as you can see, and it'll go right down to sort of like 0.1, 0.2 of a millimeter. And again, you just come along, you just start the shaft going, put that into place, so it locates, and now you've got your new handpiece on it. So I would always get one with an interchangeable handpiece, because to start off with, you may think, well, I'm not going to bother, I'm not going to worry about anything else. But these interchangeable handpieces, these quick release handpieces, absolutely brilliant. So if you're going to go for a pendant motor, for a flex shaft, I'd always try and go for something like what's called a Seco, a Bedico, and I would recommend the Fordham SR Fordham. It's a little red label on it. I can't take it off. It's fastened onto my hanger. Something like that, absolutely brilliant. With a foot control, you'll have years and years of pleasure with that. Yes, Louise, next question.
Okay, this one's from Orly, who's asking, please talk about how to make and bend a knife edge ring.
So several ways of doing that would be, I've got my pen and paper to hand today. Where's my pen and paper? Where's my notepad today? Thank you, yes, very kind. Kenny, thank you. Okay, so what I would be inclined to do, there are several ways you can make a knife edge shank. I would always try and make it into a complete ring. Oh, thank you, the pencil. And I would perhaps make it out of some square section wire. Make the square section into a whole ring, so it's a completely square section ring all the way around, and then hammer the one end. Hammer preferably on the joint and hammer it onto a metal block. Now let me see if I can just quickly draw this. So we've got a square section. Let me just go onto the camera so we can see what I'm doing. There's a look around there. There we go. Okay, so there we go. So hopefully you can see what I'm drawing around here. So this is your square section ring that comes round. Okay, so that comes around here like that. So this is your square section. You've got your solder joints along here and here, and then you hammer this flat. So you get the ring that's going to be round, but then on one end, it's going to be doing that because you're going to be hammering it flat against the block and hammering it in this area downwards, and the metal is going to spread in all directions. If you want to make sure the metal spreads upwards, use a cross pane hammer. If I got one here, my tripod's in the way. Yes, I have. So I would use this type of hammer. It's called a cross pane. Hammer that into this area here on the ring. Okay, right across here. So if I take my ring off, I won't hammer it again, Louise. I must get some rings to the side of me. So that would be the ring there. You've got one there. Okay, see if that works. Okay, so let's put the wedding ring. Oh, crumbs. So here is the ring here. I would then hammer at this edge here. Obviously, this would be a square section, nice and thick. Hammer in this direction so the metal spreads upwards, and that would make it thinner across here. Then you'd simply then file it. Then you'd simply buff it into a nice gradual taper. So the side of the ring then would look like that. You've got a nice gradual taper. Cut through the original solder joint, and then you can cut out your little section there to put your collet in, or whatever you've got. And then the collet will come down here like that, and then your stone would be on the top. Something like that. I think that would be the best way to make a tapered shank. Some people just try and sort of taper the end of a long strip of metal, first of all, and then try and bend it round. But it's really, really difficult to actually try and bend a piece of metal when it is very deep, but very, very thin. So I always make it into a ring first, then do the shaping afterwards. And what you may need to do is you may need to just file the underneath here, because as you tap the ring, the metal is going to spread upwards and downwards. So you may need to file the bottom to keep that into a nice alignment, nice proper finger size on the inside. But that would be my best way, I think, of making a tapered shank. Yes, Louise, next question, please.
A few questions about rolling mills. Amanda is asking, do you think buying an entry-level rolling mill is a waste of money, or should I keep saving?
I suppose there comes a point when you've got to realize, well, how much money do I want to spend on a rolling mill? And I would always try and save up. I wouldn't buy the really, really cheap rolling mills that you can buy. You can buy some with interchangeable rolls. They're okay for a certain amount of time, but I would always try and save up as much as you possibly can. And they are expensive, I have to agree with that, but it is one of the best investments I think you can personally make. Try and get a rolling mill with a gearbox, not necessarily a direct drive, because it's going to be a lot easier on you. Let me just quickly turn my close-up camera around here, and we should be able to show you what I mean here. So this is where we go. Here we go. Okay, so this is a gearbox. Here, as this turns once, it turns the rolls about 1/5 of a turn. So every 5 turns of the handle turns the rolls down once. That is the best type of mill that you can get. If you get a direct drive, 1 complete turn of the handle is 1 complete turn of the rolls. And if you're doing anything sort of like melting silver down to recycle it and you want to roll ingots through it, it's going to be really, really hard work. So yes, I would save up, call in your Christmases, your birthdays, get your mothers, your fathers, your partners, your brothers, your sisters, your friends to chip in with some money to get the best mill that you can afford, and it will last you. Buy something decent, buy something like, I will say, a Durston, because I'm in the UK, or buy a Pepe rolling mill, because they are going to be one of the, yes, I know, because they are some of the best mills that you can buy. Save up and get something with a gearbox. You'll thank me for it in the long run, because it will last you a lot longer. The mill I bought was sort of like 400, 500 pounds. That was over 30 years ago, and I've still got it. I still use it downstairs, and it's got a gearbox on it, and it's the best thing I ever bought. So yes, fantastic investment, but don't buy at an entry level. Just try and save up as much as you possibly can and buy the best you can afford. Preferably one of those brands. If you're in the UK, definitely buy a Durston and get one with a gearbox. Just let me turn my camera around now. Go on.
Can I fire away?
Yeah, you carry on.
Another rolling mill question. James is asking, when I put my silver in the rolling mill, it cracks. There is a little solder in there from melting down scrap rings. Is that the problem? And if so, what do you do with unwanted rings?
Okay, so the best thing that you can do when you're melting some metal down is always try and look for the solder joints. If you've got a plain band like this, just warm it up slightly until it slightly discolors. If there's a solder joint, it will show where it is. Cut that solder joint out, cut straight through it. If you've got things like chain and so forth, try and limit the amount of chain you melt down. And if you do have somebody's chain to melt down, or you're melting down chain, try and get some nice quality casting grain to go in it, because the solder is made up of an alloy that will affect the quality, the malleability of the rest of the metal. So if you try and roll it down, if there is a lot of solder in it, yes, it will crack. You do have to make sure that you try and take as much solder out as you possibly can. If it keeps on cracking, sometimes you can remelt it, perhaps without having too much oxygen in the flame, so it's a bit more of a slightly bushier flame, because silver will absorb oxygen from the torch when you're melting down. And if it absorbs too much, it'll make it almost like an aero. It looks really solid, but it's quite brittle, it's quite airy, so it will crack. There are little techniques that you can get away if you've got a crack along an edge of a surface. You can file it out to the bottom of the crack so you can't see any cracks in there. Then carry on putting it through the rolling mill, and you should be okay with it. But the best thing is to avoid the problem by taking out as much solder as you can. And as I said, if you do have items with a little bit of solder in it, try and add some fresh metal to it, some casting grain or some offcuts that you may have just sort of like lying around that there's no solder in it, and add that to the piece just to limit the amount of solder, because it will affect the malleability of the metal. How's that? That's a good one. Thank you. Good question. Yes, next question. Yep.
Getting lots of soldering questions. Lauren is asking, could you talk about solder for gold?
Just basically use gold solder. It comes in the same sort of qualities. You've got an easy, medium, and hard. Exactly the same. If you're using yellow 9 carat metal, you use a yellow 9 carat solder. Your easy, medium, and hard. So the hard is the highest melting point. The easy is the lower melting point. If you're using 18 carat, you use 18 carat solder. If you're using 18 carat white metal, you've got to use 18 karat white solder. So the solder has to match not only in color, but also in purity to the metal you're working with as well. So if you're like a jobber, like someone who does repairs, you're working with different quality metals, different color metals, you've got to have a good range of solder by the side of you. The solder works in the same way as silver. You can use the same flux, you can use the same acid or the safety pickle, and it's pretty much exactly the same, just a little bit more expensive. Kind of a little little panel of solder these days does cost a lot. You can also use syringe solder, although I would not necessarily use syringe or paste solder for doing big seams, soldering rings, resizing rings, that sort of thing. But the paste is ideal if you're using it for chains, a little bit of fine jump rings, fine chains, that sort of thing, where you can limit the amount of solder that goes onto the piece. And again, you can get that in an easy, medium and hard, although I don't think you can get that in all the various purities of gold. So yeah, it's exactly the same. Match the color, match the purity, match everything else to the metal that you're working with. And I think you should have no problems at all. I hope that answers your question. Thank you. Yes, Louise.
Okay, this is from Bruce. I have oxypropane little torch and butane torch. With oxypropane, it seems hard to see due to the glow of the flame. Is there any way to see better, like glasses with filters?
You can have a little area where it's a little bit darker. So with these studio lights here, it is quite difficult to see the true color of the flame. But if you have like a bench light above your bench and you want to solder, well, then sometimes by flicking that off and it's a little bit darker where you're working, you can be able to see the flame a lot easier. Or do it in a dark corner, something like that. Or if you've got a bright window coming towards you, perhaps just get a soldering block just by the side of you like this. So say the window's here, coming this way, just protect the area, keep away the sunlight, keep away the direct light. And if it's slightly darker, you should be able to see the flame. And I think you can use welding glasses. They're okay, but then you can see the flame nicely, but then you can't really see the item you're working on. They're ideal if you're working on something like platinum, but I wouldn't necessarily use goggles for normal day-to-day soldering. And the more you use the flame, the more you use your torches, you know where the hottest part is, and always start further away than what you need and always come closer with the flame in case, especially with the oxygen and propane torches, the Smith's little torches, the flame can be really, really, really hot, and you put the tip right onto the piece you're actually working on, you could easily melt it. So always bring the torch further back and just ease it further forward, because I reckon you could actually solder a piece without the flame getting anywhere near the actual piece that you're working on. So that would be my little bit of a hint and tip for you there. So make it nice and dark, or a darker area, and you can see the flame a lot easier. Yeah, excellent. Yes, Louise, yeah.
Emily Designs is asking, do you have a video on using a hammer piece for the flex shaft? If not, will you do one, please?
I don't, but I will, yes. I think we've used them on At the Bench. And I think, yes, we won't just make a note now, hammer action, hand piece. Yes, I will make one, and I'll make one on shaping the anvils as well. And I'll also show you the little diamond tips that we've got to put that gorgeous texture. Yeah, they're really, really good hand pieces. You can alter the, what's it called? Reciprocation? It's almost like a pneumatic drill, isn't it? The tip goes forwards and back. There's a little adjustment on the side. I've got this in place. Yes, I have. You've got the little adjustment on the side here that you can adjust the amount of pressure that goes forward. But yeah, ideal, excellent idea for a film. Thank you. We'll get one done over the next week or so. Miss Louise.
Next question is how to make a spiral with a silver ribbon and make it remain elastic.
Make a spiral?
How to make a spiral with a silver ribbon.
With a silver ribbon. I suppose, I'm not quite sure exactly what you mean. I'm trying to think. So you,
like a slinky.
Like a slinky, so it's flexible, but it still retains its shape. Could be. So then you can buy silver. Yeah.
Silver.
Yeah.
Ribbon, yeah.
Yeah. So you can buy silver from the bullion dealers. You can buy it in a fully annealed state. You can also buy it in a half hard state, which means it's not quite annealed, but it's not really, really hard. So that means that if you bend the piece, it will pretty much stay in the position you want with a little bit of rigidity, almost like a spring, that sort of thing. But because it's quite stiff and quite hard before you start to bend it, it's going to be harder to bend it into shape. You could always try and burnish a piece of metal to try and harden it. Some people try and put it into something like a barrel polisher and hoping that the action of the shot going over will burnish and harden the piece. Sometimes that may happen. That may work okay. But yeah, it's quite a difficult one. But I would try and buy your piece of metal that's hard or half hard. But don't forget, if you solder onto that, you're going to take away the hardness and the properties of that. So I think that's what you mean. So yeah, half hard piece of metal, start off with. I think that's what you mean. If it isn't, just pop it back in the chat and I'll have another look at it a bit later. But yeah, good question. Yes, Louise.
Okay, this is James, and he's asking, to what extent do you distinguish parts of your work as being art rather than craft or trade?
Art or craft?
Yeah, to
art.
what extent do you distinguish parts of your work as being art rather than craft or trade?
Help me out with that one. Craft? Art? I don't know. What do you think? Help me with this, Lou.
I don't know. When do you feel most artistic, I guess, and when?
The craftsman, as in craft. I suppose if you think about it, yeah, if you gain inspiration, I suppose, from something, that then you can sort of be creative. You can be quite arty with the piece, I suppose. Is that sort of thing? And then you can make it, and then is that craftsmanship?
It depends on your approach, isn't it?
Yeah, I suppose there are some people out there who makes them sort of absolutely wonderful, gorgeous flowing pieces that have been inspired by nature or seahorses or the sea and that sort of thing. And sometimes the pieces are very artistic and they're very flourished, and perhaps there's some enamel on it. That would be very an arty piece, perhaps quite a flamboyant statement piece, perhaps. If you want a piece that shows off craftsmanship, perhaps craftsmanship is a little bit more precise, precision, making sure every single section is exactly the same, or to the right size, the right distance. Perhaps if I was making up a full eternity ring, that would be a bit more of a craft piece, a craftsman piece, because of the complexity and the precision of getting every claw the same, every claw split, every hole exactly the same. But if I was producing something that was quite flowery, it would be a bit more arty, I suppose. Yeah.
Your more innovative pieces are more artistic, and like you say, your eternity rings and very traditionally things. I suppose they overlap so much, don't they?
I suppose so. Perhaps would your traditional work be your craftsmanship of it? And perhaps so. Yeah.
It's good one to get you thinking, isn't it?
Yeah, good thinking that. Yeah, I don't want to think too long on that. It hurts the brain. Yeah, next question.
Okay, the puppeteer is asking, why does my ezflo solder cause holes in my pieces? Any ideas why this would happen?
Okay, so is it paste or is it actual solder? Sometimes we've had problems with Jason using paste solder to do wide seams, and I don't think that solder was particularly made for that. I would try and not use easy solder unless I had to. I'd always try using something like a medium solder or a hard solder, because there's a higher silver content in it, so you're going to get a better joint. Sometimes you'll find that it may be due to perhaps impurities on the surface, on the solder joint. It may be perhaps some dirty flux, where the flux is stopped and interrupted the flow of solder, perhaps. I think, again, preparation would be ideal on a joint. It has to be completely touching, completely parallel all the way through. Nice amount of cleanliness, pass a saw blade through a joint or some emery paper, make sure there's plenty of flux on it, get those joints absolutely perfect. The most minimal amount of solder, so that's why I would never sort of stick feed, always try and minimize the amount of solder that goes on a joint. And that's what I would do. Perhaps overheating as well. overheating the joint will sometimes burn off the alloys or the flow-in qualities of the solder, and sometimes that would happen as well. And I've seen that happen on a few occasions. So try not to overheat, because what will happen, perhaps the solder may start to bubble, and that may cause the holes in it as well. So try and keep the heat just to the melting point of the solder, and don't prolong the flame on the piece, because you don't want the solder to get too hot. As I said, otherwise the properties of the solder will just burn away, and that could be the result of the holes. Good question, no. Good question. Yes, Louise.
Okay, Jane has a question. Followed your video on buffing and polishing. Have buffed with different 600 grits and also up to 2000, but still have some marks. Any advice, please?
Oh, right. Okay. I just did a film about an hour ago that we're going to put up on YouTube in a couple of days on exactly that question, using the buff sticks, where I show how we can simply use our buff sticks to polish. Now, if you've gone through to, say, to 2000 grit paper, when you come to polish it, you should be using like a pre-polish, something like, it's in my tray here somewhere, there it is there, something like Tripoli, which is a nice brown pre-polish, and you should then have something like some rouge, or you could always use, and just to prove I was doing my film a little bit earlier, I have got some Menzerner polish as well. If you got down to 2000 grit, then you use a pre-polish. Use that if you're using a flex shaft, using something like a calico mop, a hard mop like that, with a pre-polish. Go in the opposite direction to where you have just buffed with your buff stick. So say you've buffed in this direction, when you come to polish in the opposite direction. So the lines then will overlap, and you should get a really good finish. So use a nice hard mop or a hard felt mop with some pre-polish. Okay, so a hard mop, hard polish, a pre-polish. Then you come to do a rouge. Use rouge, or you can use the superfine from Menzerner, which I always use. You can get it in a white, you can get it in the yellow. I think the yellow is for yellow metals, the white is for white metals. And use then, because you've used a hard mop for your pre-polish, use a nice soft mop. Notice a nice, pretty much the same, doesn't it? A nice soft mop then for the rouge. Again, go in the opposite direction, use that, go over it quite lightly, keep reapplying the polish. Just don't come along with it spinning away and touching it once upon the polish. You've got to keep putting it into the polish, going over the piece, into the polish, going over the piece. And that then should give you a really, really good finish. So yeah, so look out in a couple of days' time on YouTube, and there will be a quick film to show you how, in fact, there it is there. This is what I was just producing. So we got the, let's just see if we can zoom in on this. You can just about see my dirty fingerprints are on this now. These areas by here are the 600 grits, as you can see. And then we've got a nice shiny area down the bottom here that you can get just using your flex shaft or a Dremel, using the calico mops or hard felt mops, and a nice soft rouge mop as well. So there we go. So that should be it. So look out for that on YouTube. Yes, Louise.
Okay, we're getting a couple of questions about Argentia.
Okay, so I've never.
So somebody asked right early on in the YouTube questions.
Yeah.
Do you ever use Argentia, and what are your thoughts on it? When making a tutorial for the vegetables never go wrong, do you have to refill? And
I don't use Argentium. That's the one thing. Basically. Yeah, one thing I don't use is Argentium. I know lady called, I think it's Rhonda. She does some fantastic pieces and does lots of videos on using Argentium. I've never used it. It's like an anti-tarnish silver. It's very difficult to work with because of the other metals that's within the silver, so it doesn't tarnish. I've had lots of problems of working with it, but like everything else, it's a different metal. Just don't think of it as a normal piece of silver. You have to approach it from a different standpoint. I know the silver drops and it droops and it moves. There's a lot of complications with it. So I'm afraid I can't answer that question because I've never, ever used it. So I can't answer that question. But the second part of the question, do the projects go wrong when I'm filming? Not normally. I think only about 2 or 3 projects have actually gone wrong whilst I've been filming it. And I've managed to cover that over by perhaps not showing you that particular area that just went wrong. But then when I'm off camera, but then now perhaps I'll remake the piece, or I'll do it and I'll put it right. But I don't like to do that too much, because it's obviously important to show you the things that can go wrong when we make a piece. But on a very, very, very rare occasions, does something go wrong. But normally I will put it right. I think I've only once ever had to remake a piece completely when it went wrong right towards the end. Oh, that hinged bangle. Sorry, there's a hinge bangle, silver hinge bangle. When I was soldering it, I actually did mess up on the very, very end. So I just had to remake the end plate to go on, but all was good in the end. But yeah, interesting question. Just let you into a secret then, didn't I? Yeah, good question. Yes, Louise, next question.
Yeah, Ken is asking, what gravers would you suggest I'd need if you could only buy 3 or 4 to get practicing with, especially for pave settings?
Okay, yeah, another good question. And I've also got gravers here that we're going to do a film on as well. The problem that you've got, if you're doing something like pave work and you're trying to remove metal from in between the actual holes where the stones are going to sit, you need quite a few various widths because of the amount of metal that you're going to remove. For argument's sake, if you had a plate and you're just on close-up camera so we can see. So if you have a plate like that, and you've just got 1 stone here, and you've just got 1 stone here. So, okay, so all this metal's been removed. You want to remove this little area here, and this area here, this area here. Okay, so you get the general gist of the idea. So what you've got left are these claws here. So if you had just one size graver, you may end up taking too much out from between the holes. Or if you have a very narrow graver, then you could do it in a couple of stages. So the shape I would get would be a flat bottomed engraver. That would be something like that. All right, nice and simple. Then I would also get something like a knife edge, which would be that sort of shape. I would get that. And then also perhaps I would get something what's called something like a spit stick, which is more of that sort of shape. So those are the 3 different shapes that I would get of graver. These are pretty much universal, so you can get smaller ones and large ones, but it doesn't really matter too much, and also with a spit stick as well. But these flat bottom, I think they're called onglettes, you can get them in various widths across the bottom. So these you don't even really get one of, but these here you'd most probably get a few of, depending on how much metal you actually want to remove. It's always nice to try and get the action done in one go rather than going over it twice, taking a bit from each side. So those would be the 3 different styles of gravers that I would buy. These types of engravers, these gravers here would be ideal if you wanted to engrave a little bit of a border around the plate that you're doing. Something like that. This would be ideal to get a nice bright cut all the way around, and then remove the metal then with the flat bottom from these areas here, and then you're left with these claws that you can simply split down the middle and then force over onto the stone, and likewise you'd remove the metal by there as well. So these then would be your claws. So if you have this, if this is too wide, you're going to remove too much metal from between the stones, and it's not going to look good. So there we go. So yeah, those are the 3 styles, but I would get various widths of a nice flat, a nice chisel, just to be able to cope with the various widths you're going to take. So those are what you would need. But again, I've got some gravers. Again, we're going to be doing lots more films here because we're still on lockdown. It's been about 4.5 weeks now, come up to 5 weeks. Been on there 4 years. That we've been on, seems like it, no, it doesn't, on lockdown. So we've got plenty more weeks to go yet when we're locked down. The shop is still shut. but we've got plenty of time to produce more content for you. So yes, so gravers is another topic that we get repeatedly asked for, that yes, we will be producing more films for the YouTube channel, and also for At the Bench as well. See, At the Bench. Cool. All right, yes, Louise, next question.
Okay, this is from for you two. I am learning about whiteout and yellow ochre. However, the solder is overflowing. So how do I get off my mistake of this overflowed solder that is on the metal and in an etch?
Okay, so you use the whiteout or the yellow ochre to stop the flow of metal. Yeah, that's what it was. Yep. So really, you shouldn't have had any excess metal, any excess solder, especially if you'd used little pallions. The way to get it out of an etch, you'd have to use a graver, or you'd have to use something like a little, if I got something like here, I don't have anything, this is a new bench and I'm just putting my stuff together, something like a little ball burr just to get it out of the etching. But once it's in there, really hard to get out. Your best bet would be to stop it going in there. I know it's no consolation, but a graver, a flat graver, to try and ease out some of that solder would be best. And on a surface, it's just a matter of using a file or using something like we've got here, these 3M wheels that are really, really good for getting some excess material off the surface. Or you can get the 3M radial wheels, and then you can put 3, 4, 5, or 6 of those wheels together upon a mandrel, so then you can go over the surface to remove that excess solder. And once you've done that, you have to then repolish it. If it's on a flat surface, you've got to make sure that it still stays nice and flat, and don't concentrate those sort of rubber wheels directly in one place. Otherwise, you're going to end up with a bit of a dip, but move that back and forth across the piece just to remove your excess solder. And that would be your best bet. But yeah, but practice with your Tipex or your whiteout or your yellow ochre. Also, what we also use is some rouge, some powdered rouge. Melt, you don't melt it, you put it in some water with a little bit of fairy liquid, a little bit of soap, just to break down the surface tension of that water, to mix it up into a little bit of a paste. Then you use that paste then upon the piece to stop the flow of solder. Practice, get a bit of silver, try some stop out, some whiteout, some yellow ochre, some rouge, and see which one works best for you, see which one is the best. Make sure that the rouge is dried before you put the flux on, or put the flux on first and then put the rouge on the outside. Make sure it's dried before you start to solder. And that would be the best tip, I think, there. But yeah, nice question. Good question. Yes, Louise.
Okay, this one is from Negotiator. Can you mix nickel silver and sterling silver together? I'm looking to have a nickel silver backing, sterling silver prongs to hold an arrowhead for a bolo tie?
Yeah. Okay, so like the leather thing with the, yeah, okay. Nickel silver, there's no silver in it at all. So I would not even consider using that with silver. Did you melting it down or using it as backing? Mix.
Nickel silver and sterling silver together to have a nickel silver backing, sterling silver prongs to hold an arrow.
Okay, so I suppose, yes, you could. You don't want to mix, you don't want to melt them down at all. But yes, you could use a nickel silver backing and then have some sort of silver design upon the front of that. If you're in the UK, you're going to have problems if it's over the, is it 6.78 grams, 7.78 grams. If it's more than that, it needs to be legally hallmarked. If you've got anything else on the back of it that is not to the same quality as what you got on the front of it, it will not be hallmarked. If you do have a nickel silver backing with the silver front, you can't reclass that piece as silver. You'd have to say that perhaps it's silver front, or silver pronged, or silver clawed, or silver embellishments, because you can't say it's completely silver. Otherwise, you're confusing that customer, saying it's silver when it's actually half and half nickel silver. So yeah, there is no silver in nickel silver. To reduce costs, by all means, do that. That's a great idea. But personally, I would always try and use silver if you could possibly do so. It doesn't cost an awful lot more than what the nickel silver would be. And then you can honestly, truthfully say that that piece is all silver, as opposed to sort of half and half. Yes, Louise.
Okay, this is Sandra. Hopefully you can help me. I made 2 reticulated ring shanks. Now that I am polishing, little holes appear, like moulding holes. What did I do wrong?
Holes are appearing in your reticulation. I don't think there's anything wrong, because the idea with the reticulation is to produce those cavities and those craters across the whole piece, and to have holes in it. If there are holes all the way through, I don't know. If there's holes all the way through and then you've melted the piece, you've gone too far with that reticulation. But that's what you mean. There should be some sort of texture to it. Perhaps if there are holes, perhaps you've gone a little bit too far with the melting down, and perhaps reduce the amount of heat or pull the flame away off the surface as you do in the reticulation, perhaps, if that's what you mean. But I don't think I would worry too much. Perhaps just practice with the reticulation, getting the use of the flame upon the surface to get the right sort of texture that you need. You could experiment with the number of times you deplete it and you put it in your acid, perhaps, to see then how much reticulation the piece will achieve with the flame. But I don't think I would worry too much if there's so dense and small little holes across the surface. I'd worry if it went all the way through. But I think that just adds to the texture of the piece and the one-off design that you're producing, because you can never get the same piece twice using reticulation. So I think that is what you mean. I think it is. Question. So, is he tapping away there?
Tapping away. This is from Lee. I have a Delft clay casting block, and it came with some mediocre clay. Even when using some powder, it always seems to stick together while making the mold. What products do you consider pro quality? Okay, so as much as people say about things like Petrobond, and there's a guy called Craig Dabler in the US who actually produces his own cast-in clay. I've never tried that. And Craig, if you're watching or you know someone who knows Craig, I'd love to try his sort of cast-in clay. If you would like to send me some, happy to try it out. I've tried Petrobond and a few other types here in the UK, and they tend to be quite coarse. Me personally, I would always buy Delft clay sand from the jewelry tool suppliers. I think personally it's a lot finer and you're going to get a far better detail with it. Obviously, when you hammer it together, it's going to compact and compress and stay together. Yes. Sorry. Oh, sorry. You did. I thought thinking your hands up. Sorry. Okay. So we've got 3 minutes left. Okay. So yeah, I'd always use Delft clay. It's the best sand you can get, unless there's somebody else producing it. And then actually send it to me. I'd gladly try it out. Let you know my findings. When you come to put the mold together, you've got the male and the female, the lower and the top half. If you don't want them to stick together, a little bit of talcum powder or some cornstarch over the surface when you put the next ring on top, and then hammer the sand in. The two halves don't stick together. Even though they'll come together nice and tight and compressed, they won't stick because the talc stops the two halves from sticking. That would be the best thing. As I said, Petrobond I've tried. It tends to be more coarse when you cast. You've got to hammer it even harder to try and compress it. Personally, it's cheaper, but personally, I wouldn't bother. Delft clay all the way. I've got one last question, Louise. Yep. What looks like a quick one. Okay, what can you use as a substitute for PMP in etching silver?
Okay, so PMP paper, an alternative. I don't think there's an alternative to the PMP paper itself, but you can obviously use things like a marker pen. You could always use things like sticking masking tape, sellotape, parcel tape upon the surface that you want. And then you could always cut out the design, some stencils. You can get some of these quite reasonable stencil cutters now in places like Hobbycraft and those sort of craft shops, that allows you to produce vinyl letters or vinyl stencils or vinyl designs. And that would be ideal for an alternative to PMP paper, because then you can actually stick it upon the metal that you've got after you've sort of printed it or cut it out, and then peel off the areas then that you want the acid to get to. And because it's vinyl, it'll be the best type of resist for the acid. If you use something like a marker pen, well, then the acid will attack the marker pen, and the longer you leave it in the solution, the more it's going to attack the marker pen. Masking tape, vinyl, that sort of thing is going to be your best bet. PMP is brilliant because you can put it through a laser printer and it'll print off some fantastic designs. But that is the limitation. You have to use your laser printer for it. So those would be my alternatives for PMP paper. Can we have one more?
Yeah.
Yeah, good. Yeah, next question.
Why can't you pickle a hot piece?
You can.
Mm.
I always do. Some people will say that if you put a piece into the acid when it's hot, some of the acid will go into the surface of the piece. I think perhaps, yes, it would if it was red hot and you plunged it into the acid. What I always try and do is make sure the piece is at a black heat, which means that there is no glow coming from it. So when you heat up a piece of metal, it turns red, obviously. So then, you know, time's up.
My hand
Yeah.
every week.
I still can't get used to them. So yeah, so heat up a piece of metal, it turns red. I would never put that into the acid. If you're soldering and you've just soldered, I finished my water, thank you. I would always then wait until the metal has cooled down, until there's no color coming from it, that's a black heat. Then I would put it into my safety pickle that is always warm anyway. Never plunge it in there, but just go carefully and put it in there. I always do that. Some people will say, well, no, you let the piece cool down first, or you put it in water first, then you put it into the acid, then to pickle. I like to try and work fast. I find by putting it in the water first, or waiting for it to cool down, then putting it in the acid, takes extra time, and it takes another minute or so to do the piece. So I would always wait for it to become a black heat, put it into the acid, it's going to go, it's going to be quench, so you know it's going to be nice and clean. You can take it out, you can work on it straight away. There's no waiting around at all. How's that? Is that okay? What, finish now? What, hour's up? Hour's up. Hour now. Oh, wow. Okay. So, okay, hour's up. Thank you all for watching. We will go through these comments again. I've got a little book by the side of me here that I've been making notes on all the past questions that have been asked.
There's so many today we haven't been able to.
There's loads. Yeah. Yes. Again. Okay. So I think what we're going to
do our best.
This my little pink book. Thank you. So yeah, I have been making notes. Been making pages and pages and pages of notes. That one, there we go. There's three pages full there that we've been going through. I've been making notes on the questions and whoever's asked the questions. I think what we're going to be doing is producing a few films that we're going to be going over the questions, quoting your names if you've asked the questions, just so we can answer them, because as Louise says, there's so many questions coming in. We've got an hour. There's only so much that we can answer in an hour. We do have another idea for something that may happen later on in the month. We may be doing a marathon session of question and answer and live demonstrations. Louise, yes, isn't happy on sitting there doing that, but we really want to do an extra long quarantine stream. It's going to be a marathon session. We're going to try and get some more interaction. We want to be doing some live casting, some soldering, questions. We're going to be doing all that sort of thing. Sorry, is that? Gin and snacks. We're going to be snacking throughout the broadcast. And we want to do a marathon session. We want to be getting suppliers in with discount codes and special offers. We're going to be doing something every hour. We're going to be giving stuff away every hour. Got this in my head that I've been thinking of. So that's going to be an absolute marathon session. We may even do it over a 12-hour period. So that's something that we're thinking of. If you're interested in Louise and I putting together something like that for you over 12 hours live, non-stop talking, laughing away. No. If you're interested, put a little comment in the box down below. But yeah, we have this idea. We're going to be giving the giveaways every hour. It can be things like T-shirts, mouse mats, what we used to give away, pens, mugs, whoopie-doo, some tools and equipment. We've got Durston on board, who's got an absolutely fantastic discount that we can offer you on the day. I think I'm going to try and get some products from Matthew.
Liking this idea.
Yeah, people liking the idea. Thank you. So then we want to be giving away tools, equipment, and I think the one thing we're going to be giving away would be a rolling mill throughout the 12-hour. Just one rolling multi, lucky person to be shipped anywhere in the whole world. So that is something that we're thinking of. If you want us to do that, just mention the chat box in the comment section or whatever down below.
They are.
Oh my gosh, it was an idea.
You've got to do it now.
You've got to do it now. So that's something that, and also the reason why we're going to be doing it is that we want to be raising money for the COVID-19 as well. So we want to be asking you for donations throughout the whole 12 hours. So that's something that we want to get into, just raising some money as well for the people who need it, who have been affected by this terrible, terrible situation that we're in at the moment. But anyway, on a lighter note, thank you all for coming on. Yes, Louise.
Just confirm the time for next week, somebody was asking.
Yes, you 3:30 or is it 3? 3. So again, next week, keyword. So next week, again, 3:30, the 6th of May, we're going to be here, 3:30 British summertime. In my little thumbnails, I put all like, what time is it in Moscow, Germany, New York, and so forth. So we're going to try and also perhaps have 1 or 2 later ones as well. So the guys down in Australia and on the west coast of the USA can actually join us as well. So that's the reason why we're going to be doing a 12-hour one. So everybody can join in from around the world when we come and do that. So that's going to be real fun. Okay, enough talking, really gone over time. My name is Andrew Berry for At The Benches YouTube channel. Thank you very much for all the questions. Keep them coming in. Same time next week, 3:30, 6th of May. Hope to see you then. But in the meantime, keep an eye out on YouTube for some more films later on this week. And a big thank you to Jasmine, our moderator, who's been bringing things to our attention. Thank you very much, Jasmine, for that. But in the meantime, we will see you all. Gone red now. We will see you all next week. Everybody, take care. Thank you so much. Stay safe. Bye for now.